All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark, and welcome to another IELTS video on IELTS Task 1 Writing for academic purposes. It's been a long time. I haven't put up a video like this in a while, so hopefully you find this useful. I'll be putting up more videos over the coming weeks, doing writing, speaking, all that fun stuff. But for now, here is the video. Now, this was a writing task from an older book, but we did this recently with an IELTS simulation, and we got a lot of okay writing tasks done for us, and I will admit this one is a difficult one to do, and a large part of the reason for that is that this is an unusual group of charts. Just to read over it, the first chart below shows how energy is used in an average Australian household. The second chart shows the greenhouse gas emissions which result from this energy use. Summarize, you know the drill. Now, I actually, because in IELTS you're not just supposed to describe the charts, but you're supposed to, as it says here, report the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Now, this one is either missing important information or is making assumptions that we cannot see looking at it. I actually took this to an engineer, and he seemed a little bit confused. And he didn't understand how the numbers would be different. Now, if you see here, it says Australian household energy use, and you've got the different percentages. So water heating takes up 30% of the energy, heating 42%. Now, if you look at the second part, Australian household greenhouse gas emissions, you've got water heating 32, which is about the same here, but then heating becomes 15%. Now, as I said, I looked at this, I couldn't really understand it. I took it to an engineer, he was kind of confused, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It's just a little weird, but you can still do the task appropriately. However, if you can see something I don't, please put it into the comments. I'm always happy to see new ideas, and most teachers won't say this, but we often learn from our students, and sometimes our students will have ideas or see things that we can't. I know you hate to hear that, but it is the sad truth, or an honest truth. Now, let's just consider first that, as I always say with this test, and pardon the clicking, always take 5 minutes to analyze. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, but Mark, I have 5 minutes to analyze, then I only have 15 minutes to write. That's correct. My advice is you only need 15 minutes to write. If you do a proper analysis, if you make a good plan, you only really need 5 to 10 minutes to write. Now, I admit I'm a pretty good writer, so that's not really the best possible advice, but generally I see people constantly writing it in 20 minutes, not really doing a good job, and they just kind of start going. Take the time to analyze. That is how we teach at the school I work at. 5 minutes to analyze. So my advice would be take 5 minutes, press pause right now, and analyze. Go. Press pause. All right, welcome back. Now, I'm sure you saw some of the same things that I did. Heating 42% here, 15% here. So I made a bit of a note here. Now, I didn't write down the data sets, but I wrote down the difference. So for whatever reason, heating is 15 here and 42 here. That's roughly 1/3 of the difference. Water, 30%, 32%, generally the same. OA, which is other appliances, here is 15, here is 28%. So I said 100% more, maybe a bit better, almost double. I should get rid of 100% more. That's going to be confusing, but it is actually 100% bigger. So, right, you've multiplied it by 2, that's a 100% increase, even though it's a 15% increase, which, by the way, is a key point. You can say it increased by 13%, but that doesn't really say as much as it doubled. Okay, so we always use investing as an example. Think about, let's say, a Facebook stock. At one point, Facebook stock was worth $20, and it grew to its original size when it was offered at $40. Now, a lot of people might say, well, it increased by $20. But the value is actually a 100% increase. That is the most important thing about task 1, is really think about how big that size difference is. This is not something I expect you'll understand right now, but think about it, keep applying it, watch more of my videos. I talk about it a lot. Also, refrigerator doubles in size, 7% to 14%. And you can see the rest. Cooling, right, roughly the same, 2 and 3. Lighting doubles, 4 to 8. All right. Now, my general advice for the introduction. Copy the task. Most people say paraphrase. I've paraphrased it a little. Look, if it takes you 2 minutes to paraphrase or 20 seconds to copy, I would just say copy it. The reason is if you just paraphrase it badly, it's not really going to help your score. This is an unimportant sentence. Don't waste time. Don't waste mental energy on it. Your mental energy is a resource, and if you spend 3 minutes trying to carefully paraphrase this task, you're just wasting your mental energy and you're wasting time. If you're going to try and paraphrase it, just copy it. In the IELTS test, it just means they won't count these words towards your word count. But it's not going to add or subtract anything as long as you write after that at least 140 words or 150. But you can write a little bit less. Insider secret. All right. Then, typically they ask for an overview, something that kind of tells you overall what happened. Here's what I've done. Now, actually, there's 2 ways you might do this. You might say, heating is the biggest use of energy, and water heating is the biggest greenhouse gas emitter, and that would be fine. I've gone a little bit more careful here, or a bit more detailed. Although heating is the main source of energy use, water heating is the main producer of greenhouse gas. So I've kind of put these 2 points together. Although this is the bigger one here, this is the bigger one here. So you could do and or although. I think I really wanted to go with although because, I noticed that this one was 42 and this one was 15, so I wanted to say it was not the biggest, but that's not really that important. Anyway, let's move on. Now, I would say, take 1 point and describe it, and then in your second paragraph, make the comparisons. Not always, but a good point. Now, heating is clearly the main reason for energy consumption. Oof, that is ugly. I wrote that a little too quickly. So I'd say maybe a little bit better is clearly the main household cause of energy consumption. Okay, now what we're doing here, we've got the trend. All right, now this is super important. Trend, and then using 42% of the energy accounted for in the chart. Data. That is your second point after the overview. Support trends with data. Or you can put the data first, then trend, either way. Just remember that. Trend, data. Trend, data. On your test day, I want you to hear my voice in the back of your head. Trend, data. I'm going to do it again. This is followed by water heating at 30%. Trend, second biggest. Data, 30%. Now you've noticed as well, the most important piece I've made quite big, and then the second point is a bit smaller. Refrigeration, lighting, and cooling all account for far less at 7, 4, and 2 respectively. Other appliances account for 15%. So it's a little strange, I might have put that first, but because these ones are more specific, I've consciously decided to put it first. That's the main thing with this test. There's no right or wrong or perfect or imperfect way. Just make a conscious choice. I've decided that because other appliances could be 10 different things, I've decided to put it after these specific points. Because it kind of looks like all other appliances are all going to be less than 2%. Again, I'm assuming, but it doesn't matter. Okay, now I'm getting into the second part, which is here. Emissions, however, do not match these trends. Now what I've done here is my first sentence is basically telling you, now we're going to talk about emissions, and it's an extra powerful sentence because it's pointed out these trends are different from the previous one. So it's really nice. This paragraph talks about the energy use trends, and then this paragraph nicely transitions to the greenhouse gas emissions. Despite being the main consumer of energy, heating only accounts for 15% of the emissions. Now, I've made a comparison. So look at this sentence. I've made a comparison, I've provided data, and then I've highlighted it. So I didn't just say it was less, but I highlighted that it's nearly a third of the size of the consumption amount. Actually, a little bit more appropriate would be slightly more than. That's a little bit better. Slightly more than a third of the size. Is that correct? Yes, my math is correct. Slightly more than a third of the size of the consumption. So, I've done a few things here. Compare. Data. Then highlight. Yeah. All right. So that, and I'll be honest, this is where people really don't do things very well. I never see this. Like, I'm not just saying it's less, I'm saying, hey, like, that's a noticeable drop. Okay? So, you know, I mean, the thing is, it doesn't really drop. If this was like, you know, energy use in 2008 and energy use in 2018 and it dropped, I would say dropped. But in this case, the indication is that this is at the same time. So I'm just going to highlight that it's, you know, more than a third. Now that's also an interesting choice I've made because I've started with 15% instead of the big one over here in the data, which is 32%. Again, there's no perfect way, but also because I've highlighted the point that it's, you know, this is actually the bigger one from the previous set of data, it works. Then I go to the high one. Water heating is the main cause of greenhouse gas. Okay, so again, I really comment that emissions don't match the consumption trends. Then I give the biggest example of how that works. All right, so notice how I go from this sentence to this sentence, and it fits nicely. If I said emissions do not match these trends, and then I said water is the same as in, it's the same in both, that doesn't really make sense. But because I've said emissions don't match the trend, and then I've given the example of not matching, the sentence flows nicely from the previous one. By the way, beautiful little structure, comma, however, comma. You know, a lot of people like to do the however first. This is another way to do it. Water heating is the main cause of greenhouse gas. Okay, so again, I've really made that point clear. Main cause of greenhouse gas, trend. At 32%, data roughly equal to the consumption rate, comparison. And I guess it's kind of a highlight as well. All right, so keep that nice and simple. And again, this sentence has put a lot of information in there. And yeah, like I've done a lot with one sentence. Then I go on to the next one. Refrigeration causes 14%. Now, at this point, you know, I don't have to say anything like refrigeration is the third big, like it just doesn't matter. And I've gone to that one because it's quite, like that one's clearly marked. Like other appliances is, you know, like we just don't know what that is. So I've gone with refrigeration is 15%, 14%, so that's kind of trend and data. Double its consumption rate, so that's the comparison. 14, 7. So again, highlight and compare. A similar trend is spotted in other appliances at 28%. So again, instead of saying the same thing, right, for 15%, 28%, I just said a similar trend is spotted in other appliances at 28%. So at this point, I've decided to say a little bit less. And, I did cooling and lighting show similar emission rates at 3% and 8%. Actually, really thinking about that, that's not really, that's kind of lazy, because remember, 3% is half, it's 50% bigger than 2, and lighting is a 100% increase. So maybe not similar, I'll just say low. Okay, so that's a little bit lazy. If I wanted to say lighting has increased twofold, then that probably works as well. But I've just decided to keep it simple, and that's fine. Maybe you'd do better if you said as an alternative, lighting also showed an increase rising to 8%, not 7, 8%, comma, a twofold increase. How nice is that? All right. So it's actually really interesting. Like, look at this. 7% for refrigeration here, 14%. Lighting has increased from 4% to 8%. So they've actually shown a similar trend. Now that I look at it, I could have done a different organization. I could have said other appliances, refrigeration, and lighting all showed a twofold increase. So those three increased more. Now, I know you're all thinking like, oh, so do that. That's perfect. Like, it's probably better. It doesn't really matter. I don't really care about getting you like the perfect score today. I'm just trying to show how these videos, how to approach these tasks. So don't just describe it and talk about it mechanically, but really highlight the trends and also train yourself to look at that. 14.7, right? That's a twofold increase. That's technically a 100% increase in the relative value. Now, I've talked about this a lot. Value, 100% value increase. If your IELTS writing test is tomorrow, this may not be very helpful, but if you've watched my other videos, I think this will help you quite a bit. And remember, like, practice this stuff. It's not just about language, it's about your ability to analyze. Analyzing data is the most important part, all right? And it's really sad because most English teachers and writing teachers are not good at this. So please have a look at the video, watch it again. All right, you've probably missed it. Remember, it takes multiple, viewings and multiple practices to really get this stuff internalized. I hope you enjoyed this. I found it a bit challenging myself. And yes, actually, some of you might have been thinking, well, I don't understand. Why does this change? The only thing that I can really think of as to why heating would be 42% and 15%, if somehow like they were trying to show that Australian houses that have solar panels and that energy is only used for house heating, which it isn't, so it reduces the greenhouse gas, but it doesn't really make sense because if you don't have solar energy installed at your house, then all the energy comes from the same place. So it doesn't, I would love it if someone can explain this to me, and otherwise I think it's just kind of a strange one. But as I said, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, you can still do the task and do it very well. Have a look, lots of useful pieces of grammar in here. Lots of little phrases you can use, like roughly equal to. And again, comma, roughly equal to. Comma, double its consumption rate. Like, if you're going to be doing the test, like, steal some of your phrases, that'll help out the most. Anyway, it's been a long time. I hope to do some more of these videos for you guys soon. Feel free to like, subscribe, and say something in the comments. And have yourselves a wonderful day. And best of luck with your upcoming IELTS tests, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.